Hey, how you guys doing tonight? I'm back in East Keensburg, New Jersey after a lovely weekend out in PA with the wife. Good week at work, and ready to continue talking about some of the blunders we make when we're trying to figure out cause and effect um, of a problem that we're facing, whether as an individual or for our society or our culture. So this week I want to discuss the blunder of false causality. Now, while it's similar to the mistakes we make in assigning cause and effect that I spoke about last week, the false causality that I'm talking about is how and the why of why we believe something is in a causal relationship when in fact it just accompanies the cause. It's an accompanying effect. It goes along with the cause and the effect, but it's not either one. All right, so one of the problems is how we view cause and effect in our lives, how we misapply it. We're often trying to separate cause and effect into two distinct things sometimes. That makes sense scientifically, but when we do it to our lives, it's not always the greatest. And even scientifically, sometimes it's hard to do. Because that is to say, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that we look at our actions to delineate cause and effect, and it's something like saying, an earthquake caused the ground to rumble and shake. Well, an earthquake is the ground rumbling and shaking. I mean, that's what an earthquake is. It's that the earthquake doesn't cause the rumbling. The earthquake is the rumbling. You can't separate the earthquake necessarily into cause and effect that way. It's like saying the fire caused the wood to burn. Well, the fire is the wood burning. So when you say things like that, it has no value in causality. So let's keep that in mind as we think about the ego as the cause of our actions, our conscious ego, that is. Now, often the cause we're giving for our actions is illogical because we're trying to separate the doer from the deed. Just like trying to separate the earthquake from the rumbling and the shaking, or trying to separate the flash from the lightning. So what arises from this line of thought and realization is that we attach motive and cause to our doings, to our deeds, more frequently than we think as we do them, and even after we do them, not always before we do them. So in my eyes, our conscious ego is more like a self-narrator, right? Giving like play-by-play to our actions, kind of like a sportscaster, as a way for our, ego consciousness to make sense of and justify our motives. The motives that are actually being driven far more by our unconscious desires, needs, our wants, all our various wills, the things we want to will into happening. So sometimes our ego is not the cause of our actions. Now, I'm not saying, we have to have free will because we have to hold people responsible for the things they do, But we're not talking about in a legal sense. Like, I'm talking about like examining ourselves and others and the problems with relationships and stuff and why we do the things we do. So sometimes our ego is not the cause of our actions. Our ego is but the justification of our actions and accompaniment to them. It accompanies them, so to speak. Now, I'm sure you've all heard or read an interview with a musical artist. I don't know, pick whoever you like, If you're a big Springsteen fan or a Beatles fan. And I've heard so many guys say this. So the musical artist, they'll get interviewed, and they'll ask them, "Hey, how did you come up with the idea for that song? That song is so good; it's your biggest hit. Millions and millions of people bought it and listened to it. How did you come up with the idea? How did you write the melody, the hook, and the lyrics? What was the work process that went into it?" And often the artist's best songs are created just they'll look at you and be like, I don't know where I got the idea from. It just came from me out of the blue. I was picking up the guitar and been sitting with it all day, and all of a sudden, it just came to me. And they'll write this genius, brilliant song that we all love in like 15 minutes, and we all are like, wow, what an incredible achievement. But the guy don't even know how he thought of it. I mean, it's so good we listen to it over and over, but the guy can't explain how he came up with it. The artist doesn't have a clue where his idea came from. So my claim would be, it's got to come from somewhere. It didn't just come out of thin air. And so it's obvious to me that it came out of his subconscious mind. His subconscious mind, it likes to write songs. Its whole persona is part of identity is he's a songwriter. So even subconsciously he's thinking about songs. So he's sitting down and consciously, all of a sudden, this song reveals itself to him. So now you're kind of like, oh, well, I mean, technically, of course you thought of it. It's you, but you didn't consciously think of it. I mean, the artist will even say, I don't know where the idea came from. And I'm sure we can all relate to that because how often, I'm sure we've all done this, but we've all committed an action or deed where right after we commit the act, we think, oh, why did I just do that? What made me behave that way? And then we go searching for a cause post hoc. We assign a cause after the fact, but that doesn't change the fact that we committed an action without knowing until afterwards, if at all, why we did it. So what we do a lot of the times is to assign a motive to justify that action. So that means some of our actions are either accompanied with causes during the event. So we're doing something and we're like, oh, well, I'm doing it because of this and that reason. But you're just kind of just, narrating along of what you're doing. And sometimes you add it after the event. You feel like it might even be days later. You're like, why did I do that? What was I thinking? And then you got to be careful. It's not easy to figure out if you don't know why you did the action, right? So you got to be careful how you're going to figure out the cause. So where does that leave us? I mean, it kind of leaves us at the junction of having to examine our subconscious drives and motivations when we determine why did we do the things we do, or maybe why others do the things they do. Sometimes a person will tell you why they did something, and it's like, I don't think that's the reason that person did that. I think there was more to it than that. You got to kind of think about it. It's a hard thing to do, but, you got to at least question things, even if you can't make a determination. At least, got some possibilities to think about. So where am I at here? So the ego consciousness must have been responsible, we think, but and that's where we exclusively look for causes when we should be looking at the subconscious. And on top of that, we often just arbitrarily decide where cause and effect starts and ends. We got to be careful there too, because you can always say, not only pick where you start cause and effect, but you can always be like, well, what was the cause of that cause? And so that's another pitfall. You got to kind of think through things pretty thoroughly when you're trying to figure these things out. So I hope that gives you something to think about, that maybe sometimes the justifications we come up with were the result of a drive we're having a hard time regulating. Our inner world is filled with phantoms and illusions in regard to our ego consciousness. An ego that sometimes is just shadowing the deed, and it's more likely to hide the real causes of our actions than it is to reveal them. So we gotta, it's hard to be honest with ourselves about this thing, but that's what we need to try to do. So, like always, don't have to agree with anything I say, but I hope it gives you something to think about and gives you some perspective. And, as always, much joy and love and peace. And, next week I'll be talking about, a third blunder we make with the cause and effect, and that's going to be imaginary causes. So we'll talk about that next weekend. So I hope everybody has a good week at work and has fun and whatnot. And I'll talk to you real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching.